This, and I'm gonna quote, "This jig ain't going nowhere." They throw him a punch. Jim Kelly blocks it with a rapid karate chop and a snap kick from the hips. He takes those two racist cops down. And then he gets into the police car and he peels off and leaves those cops in a cloud of dust. You should have seen and heard the audience explode. The walls of the theater were shaken. I saw Enter the Dragon every day that summer. And I wasn't alone. Every day outside the toll booth, there was a line going outside around the corner, getting longer and longer, full of black and brown people wearing kung fu outfits, high-fiving us little Chinese kids as we walk back to the back of the line. I'll never forget that summer. Fast forward, 50 years later, I'm cast in Warrior. It took Hollywood 50 years to tell the Chinese American story thanks to his daughter, Shannon Lee. Yeah, in Warrior, thank you, Shannon Lee. In Warrior, it tells the story of Chinese Americans once they got off the boat in California. Political demagoguery, minorities scapegoated, immigrants pitted against one another in the game of capitalism. In season 1, episode 1, scene 1, the lead character, Assam, gets off a boat from a long trip from China. From the darkness of the hull, he squints. The first thing he sees is an angry mob of white people chanting, "Chinese, go home! Chinese, go home!" They spat on him. Well, in real life, my great-grandfather was on that boat. And you wonder how that happened. Let's get some context. In 1863, Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation freed the African slaves. At the same time, there were American boats in Guangzhou, China, recruiting peasant labor. They didn't have any money, but these white Americans said, "Hey, sign this contract. You can pick the gold off the mountain and pay us back when you get to America." Of course, when they landed in America, it's 30 cents on the dollar to the white man's pay. In 1875, the Page Act banned Chinese women from entering the United States because they said Chinese women were prostitutes. In 1882, the Chinese Exclusion Act banned Chinese men, except for merchants, from entering the country for 60 years. 1942, the war with Japan. President Roosevelt's Executive Order 9066 ripped Japanese Americans from their homes and imprisoned them in American concentration camps. In 1982, 2 unemployed white auto workers in Detroit killed Chinese American Vincent Chin with a bat, mistaking him for Japanese. And then there was a war with Korea, and then there was a war with Vietnam. Those killers, they never served time. The judge in that case said, "We don't put Americans like that in jail." So when the pandemic came and our former President Trump and other Republicans weaponized China virus and Kung flu once again to demonize and dehumanize Asians as the enemy of America. Soon after, we saw 89-year-old Chinese grandmother in Brooklyn set on fire. 84-year-old Thai grandfather in San Francisco pushed to his death. 6 Asian women, Korean and Chinese, massacred among the 8 in Atlanta. 6,600 reported acts of violence against Asian American Pacific Islanders in the last year. When we are killed because of the color of our skin, or the shape of our eyes, or our sexual orientation, we must come together to uproot the systemic white supremacy embedded in our laws that prevents us from our civil liberties and suppresses our voting abilities. You know, that boat my great-grandfather got off of was not so different from the boats that came a century before in the Middle Passage that brought the slaves from the transatlantic slave trade, or a boat called the Mayflower that brought the Pilgrims, the first Americans, the first refugees to America. So, the great Audre Lorde, who spent her entire life fighting injustices, said that it is not our differences that divide us. It is our inability to accept, celebrate, recognize those differences. So, I always wondered what it was like for my great-grandfather to come over on a boat. Actually, for all those Americans who came on a boat many years ago. And I wondered if my great-grandfather had kept a journal, maybe it would have went like this. I've been on this vessel now for 7 days. The journey west to the Gold Mountain may take as long as 40, if the winds are on our side. I can hardly move in here. It's difficult to breathe. On the 12th day of the 10th month, a winter storm allowed us a bath on deck tonight. The cold rain did what it could to wash the vomit off our clothing. On our return, we found they had swept the feces from where we are kept, in the bowels of the ship. On the second day of the 11th month, there's more room to move now as 2 more of my fellow countrymen have died. Their bodies tossed overboard. It's a better fate that the sharks should have them for. I too am becoming weak from the soup of rotten vegetables. On the 20th day of the 11th month, my head is clouded thick with death and decay as the bones of half my brothers lay at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Even the rats won't come down here no more. Or perhaps we've eaten them all. On the 25th day of the 12th month, light cuts through the hull like a jagged blade. The Guaylo says in his devil's tongue, "You are at the gate of the Gold Mountain, at the island called Angel, where you shall wait your entry. Angel Island, where you shall wait your entry." Day of the 10th month. I've been on this rock now for 9 moons, and I can still hope that one day I can walk the Gold Mountain and pocket the gold I find. But day after day, the immigration officers question me about family, my history. You are a paper son, aren't you? You are trying to buy your way into America, aren't you? And what would you do if we allow you on the Gold Mountain? Would you take the job of an American? while others have managed to escape. Some have simply taken their lives rather than risk the hell journey back, while others simply died on this rock called Angel. This rock called Ellis. This rock called Plymouth.